Why are you here? I want you to think about that for a couple of minutes. Some of you may be here because you need a safe place to come on a Sunday night. Some of you may be here because you feel a sense of fellowship. Some of you may be here because you enjoy listening to the music. Some of you may be here because you're in the band. A good number of you are here because you need to come up and see Peter afterwards and get your attendance sheet signed. Pete's here to hear my message. So it varies a little bit for everybody, but I'm going to read something to you, and while you're listening to it, or if you're listening to it, I want you to think a little bit about the question that I posed at the start of my message tonight. Why are you here? We all need to be aware of our personal calling. What is a personal calling? It is God's blessing. It is the path that God chose for you here on earth. Whenever we do something that fills us with enthusiasm, we are following our legend. However, we don't all have the courage to confront our own dream. Why? There are 4 obstacles. First, we are told from childhood that everything we want to do is impossible. We grow up with this idea, and as the years accumulate, so too do the layers of prejudice, fear, and guilt. There comes a time when our personal calling is so deeply buried in our soul as to be invisible, but it's still there. If we have the courage to disinter our dream, we are then faced by the second obstacle, love. We know what we want to do, but we are afraid of hurting those around us by abandoning everything in order to pursue our dream. We do not realize that love is just a further impetus, not something that will prevent us going forward. We do not realize that those who genuinely wish us well want us to be happy and are prepared to accompany us on that journey. Once we have accepted that love is a stimulus, we come up against the third obstacle, fear of the defeats we meet on our path. We who fight for our dream suffer far more when it doesn't work out, because we cannot fall back on the old excuse, oh well, I didn't really want it anyway. We do want it, and we know that we have staked everything on it, and that the personal path, or the path of personal calling, is no easier than any other path, except that our whole heart is in this journey. Then, we warriors of light must be prepared to have the patience in difficult times to know that the universe is conspiring in our favor, even though we may not understand why. I ask myself, are defeats necessary? Well, necessary or not, they happen. When we first begin fighting for our dream, we have no experience and make many mistakes. The secret of life, though, is to fall 7 times and to get up 8 times. So why is it so important to live our personal calling if we are only going to suffer more than most people? Because once we have overcome the defeats, and we always do, we are filled by a greater sense of euphoria and confidence. In the silence of our hearts, we know that we are proving ourselves worthy of the miracle of life. Each hour, each day, is part of the good fight. We start to live with enthusiasm and pleasure. Intense, unexpected suffering passes more quickly than suffering that is apparently bearable. The latter goes on for years and without our noticing, eats away at our soul until one day we're no longer able to free ourselves from the bitterness, and it stays with us for the rest of our lives. Having disinterred our dream, having used the power of love to nurture it and spent many years living with the scars, we suddenly notice that what we have always wanted is there, waiting for us, perhaps just the next day. And then comes the fourth obstacle, the fear of realizing the dream for which we fought all our lives. Oscar Wilde said, "Each man kills the thing that he loves." And it's true. The mere possibility of getting what we want fills the soul of the ordinary person with guilt. We look around at those who have failed to get what we want or what they want and feel that we do not deserve to get what we want either. We forget about all the obstacles we overcame, all the suffering we endured, all the things we had to give up in order to get this far. I have known lots of people who, when their personal calling was within their grasp, went on to commit a series of stupid mistakes and never reached their goal, when it was only a step away. This is the most dangerous of the obstacles because it has a kind of saintly aura about it, renouncing joy and conquest. But if you believe yourself worthy of the thing you fought so hard to get, then you become an instrument of God, you help the soul of the world, and you understand why you are here. And this is the preface from a book called The Alchemist, written by Paul Coelho about 25 years ago. So, after listening to what I just read, or having a nap as the case may be, I asked the question again, why are you here? Are you thinking more about the question? In step 3, we make a decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Now, when I first read that step, I thought that it said, turn my problem with alcohol over to the care of God. I didn't want to think about turning my will and life over. That was too much to expect and something that I certainly did not want to do. But as I began to understand this step, I became aware of how poorly from time to time, well, to be honest, most of the time, how poorly I work this step. And I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. Our scripture tonight is from the Old Testament, 2 Chronicles chapter 1, verses 7 to 12. And I'd like to thank Diane Scheibner for pointing out this wonderful book in the Old Testament. It is a story about recovery, and if you haven't read it, I recommend that you do. It's a story about the struggles, about making progress, about falling back into dysfunction, and about moving ahead again. That night, God appeared to Solomon and said, "What do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you." Solomon replied to God, "You showed faithful love to David, my father, and now you have made me king in his place. O Lord God, please continue to keep your promise to David, my father, for you have made me king over a people as numerous as the dust of the earth. Give me the wisdom and knowledge to lead them properly, for who could possibly govern this great people of yours?" God said to Solomon, "Because your greatest desire is to help your people, and you did not ask for wealth, riches, fame, or even the death of your enemies or a long life, but rather you asked for wisdom and knowledge to properly govern my people, I will certainly give you the wisdom and knowledge you requested. But I will also give you wealth, riches, and fame, such as no other king has had before you or will ever have in the future. King Solomon knew why he was here. He was the son of King David, and now the king of Israel. He could have asked God for anything. What would you ask for? What have you asked for? King Solomon wanted to do God's will, and he knew that having riches would not be what he needed in order to do that. What he needed was wisdom. And because he asked for wisdom, God was so pleased that he was not being selfish and self-centered that he threw in a bunch of other stuff. Now, if you're anything like me, you may be sitting there thinking, now if I pray for wisdom, God will give me the stuff that I really want. Well, I don't think God is quite that easily fooled. And if you pray for things like a better job, a bigger house, a better car, nicer vacations, I'm suggesting that you might have lost sight of step 3, turning our will and lives over. If you spend more time thinking about all the things that would make your life better, like a new iPhone, a new wardrobe, a new husband or a new wife, a bigger TV, etc., 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 than you do in prayer and meditation, then you may be worshiping false idols. But you would be in good company. That's what happened to the people of Israel. When things started going good, they quickly forgot about what had got them there. They started taking back their will. They started worshiping false idols. And guess what happened? Bingo. Relapse. This book in the Bible, 2 Chronicles, tells us what recovery looks like. When the people of Israel followed King Solomon, a man who put God at the center, things got better. But they learned that the victories of one day did not necessarily mean that they would be victorious over the next. It sounds a lot like recovery, doesn't it? Just because I'm sober today doesn't mean that I will be tomorrow. The Israelites had to persevere in their faithfulness, and so do we. Remember, we're turning over our will and our lives. When they didn't follow the principles that they had learned, just like us having to practice the principles in all our affairs, their recovery was shallow and it quickly eroded, and they fell back into their old ways. You see? Relapse. Earlier I said that I have, for the most part, done step 3 rather poorly. I've heard people in meetings say things like, when I turned my will and life over to God, I never took it back. Well, I don't get that. And to be perfectly honest, I don't believe them. So when we do like the Israelites, when we do like the Israelites take our life back, when do we? Let me tell you some of the ways that I take my life back, and as you listen, think how many, if any of them apply to you. So I take my will and my life back whenever I get too busy to do my prayer and meditation. I take my will and my life back whenever I gossip about someone, take somebody else's inventory, or talk poorly about them behind their back. I take my will and my life back whenever I worry because I am not trusting that God is in control. Whenever I have an important decision to make, and I think that I am so important that I can make it on my own, I'm taking my will and my life back. Whenever I am planning for my future and not asking myself, where is God in this picture? I take my will and my life back whenever I am too busy and too important to look a street person in the eye and to say hello. I take my will and my life back whenever I don't practice grace and mercy to those who need it, even though I have received so much of it from God and from others. I take my will and my life back whenever I am harsh or dismissive of someone because I have had a bad day, or I'm in a bad mood, or I'm too self-absorbed to give a damn or remember that they matter. I take my will and my life back whenever I'm tuned out and not in the present, and acknowledging the presence of God in my life and the other people in my life because I'm glued to the TV, my computer, my phone, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. And I want to take just a moment right now to get on my soapbox and do my favorite little rant, because I can, about social media. As I was preparing my message this morning, I received an email from a friend of mine who said, click on this link, I think you'll be interested. And I want to read to you just a couple of sentences here, a few sentences, from an article that was in The Guardian. It says, in an unprecedented act of candor, Sean Parker, the 38-year-old co-founding president of Facebook, recently admitted that the social network Facebook was founded not to unite us, but to distract us. He said, the thought process was, how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? This is the co-founder of Facebook. To achieve this goal, Facebook's architects exploited a vulnerability in human psychology, explained Parker, who resigned from the company in 2005. Whenever someone likes or comments on a post or a photograph, he said, we give you a little dopamine hit. Now, anybody who's been in meetings or treatment knows all about what dopamine is. So this wasn't an invention to bring people together and create community. It was to distract you. So I also take my will and my life back when I'm on the phone with somebody and not giving them my undivided attention, and I don't stop looking at my computer screen or the TV. I take my will and my life back whenever my wife or another loved one is asking me something and I won't mute the TV and give them 100% of my attention. I take my will and my life back, like the big book says, whenever I'm agitated or fearful and don't pause to ask for the next right thought or action. Whenever I do these things and so many other things, I need to go back to step 3 because I have not turned my will and my life over. That is not what God wants for me, and that is not why I am here. Now, I am not suggesting to you that you are a horrible person if you do any of those things, because I do all of them myself, and I don't think I'm a horrible person. I'm suggesting that if you catch yourself doing any of those things, or the hundreds of more that I could think of, there is still work to do on step 3. There is always work to do on step 3. It is called self-examination and introspection, and it leads to something that we could all use more of, and that is growth. I know that we all want to be successful in whatever way we can. Now, how do you measure success? Have you started to answer that question by first asking yourself, why am I here? If you don't know the answer to that question, or if you are not at least on the quest to figure that out, how will you ever know if you are successful? Is it when your income is at a certain level? Is it when your bank account is a certain size? Is it when your car is fancy enough or expensive enough that it turns head when you drive down the streets? Is it when your labels say Gucci, Armani, or Louis Vuitton? Do you have a vague desire to be happy, but don't know how to get there? Will trying to fill up what is missing inside of you with more stuff make you happy? I don't think so. Because anytime we're relying on things that are out there to make yourself feel happy in here, you're in trouble. Because everything out there, as many of you in this room know, can be gone like that. We need to remember that the world's measure of success is not the same as God's measure of success. The hole we are trying to fill is a God-sized hole, even if we don't realize that. I believe that the journey we are on is the journey towards becoming the person that God intended us to be. But what gets in the way? We do. We think the rules and the steps and the principles and the program in general don't apply to us. We start to run our own program with us at the center instead of God. We forget all too quickly, just as the Israelites did, that that is what got us here. This is a simple program, really, but it's not easy. The answers are all right there in the big book of AA and in the other big book, the Bible. The Bible, the #1 selling book of all time. No, it's not Harry Potter, and it's not 50 Shades of Grey. It's the Bible. So what gets in the way of becoming the person God intended us to be? Well, that's simple too. We have met the enemy and he is us. This is a quote from Pogo, a comic strip from back in the 70s, and it's been around for years and used in a number of different ways from time to time. We have met the enemy and he is us. That is what gets in our way. So let's get back to my original question. Why are you here? As you go from here this week, I want you to contemplate that question. If you don't work on that, or at least work on figuring out why, how will you know what you want to be when you grow up? The two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. A quote from Mark Twain.